Hey coaches and athletes, Michael Hughes here, functional movement specialist and founder of Gymnazo EDU. If you've been in the fitness space for a bit of time, you're probably familiar with Mind Pump. Now they're definitely one of the bigger, if not the biggest podcasts in the fitness industry. Now they did a podcast a while ago about how the best bicep exercise is not bicep curls. And I want to dive into some of the things that they left out of their conversation around this idea. But first, if you're someone who likes to geek out about movement and dive deeper into the why behind how we train, coach, and move, then make sure to subscribe to our channel to keep getting fresh perspectives and strategies on all things movement and training related. Again, as a functional movement specialist, I'm not just your average iron pumping trainer. I'm always looking for the why behind everything. I want to know and understand the principles of how we move, and as a teacher, I want to help you understand the strategies behind those truths as well. So in this Mind Pump episode I'm referring to, they had a conclusion that compound bicep exercises like a chin-up are the best thing to do to get bigger biceps. But the bigger question I felt like they didn't really answer is why. So why are compound exercises better than isolation exercises when it comes to growing your biceps? Well, because it's more functional for the physics of the biceps and its neighboring muscles. What I mean by functional is that it's what the muscle tissue is designed to do, literally, or based upon its physics. This is why it's so important to understand three-dimensional muscle anatomy and to ecology and how it applies to the functional demands of our training intentions, or simply put, why we are training the way we are or the way we want to for the desired result that we're going after. So I know the term functional training can be a hot topic, but I want to know how you define functional training. Please drop a comment below. And if you're not a big fan of functional training, well, please tell me, but tell me why you're not. So let's first by starting to understand the anatomy of the biceps and their collective group in all three planes of motion. This is critical because muscle fibers, again, can always be lengthened in three distinct ways. And I got a little strap here to kind of give you a general representation of what I mean by three-dimensional muscle anatomy. So in the sagittal plane, or essentially up and down, I can take this strap and put tension through it, right? Very up and down, very kind of high-low. Well, there's two more ways that we can put tension into a muscle. I can also take this strap and move it laterally to the right and laterally to the left. And you can see as I move it one direction, there's slack that happens on one side, but tension that happens on the opposite side. And that's also true in the other direction. Slack happens on one side and tension builds on another side. That tension we can call frontal plane tension or left and right tension. And this third one, we call it spiral tension or essentially transverse plane tension. As I spin the fiber, one spin the other spinning on top. And what that does is it creates basically a shortening of the tissue because the tissue has to travel a longer distance up and around that spiral, putting more tension into that tissue. Now this strap is a simple way to look at it, but essentially all muscle tissue follows those three distinct ways, but they share more than they just do one at a time. It's really a combination of all those three, and that's what makes human movement so dynamically complex and awesome. So let's start by understanding the anatomy of the bicep region. First one, we have the coracobrachialis. Now this muscle group starts at the scapula or the coracoid process, hence its name, and it ends on the inside aspect of the humerus right here. Starts up here, ends on the inside. That's a very important note to take, that it ends on the inside of the humerus. So if we're going to load it through three-dimensional tension, right? Basically sagittal plane, how we're going to put eccentric loading through, right? Downward loading. That's how a muscle fires first, or the nerves get triggered to fire the muscle first by going in through loading. So elbow extension, we need that's sagittal plane. We're going to need humerus abduction, right? We're going to need the humerus to go away from the shoulder joint, that's going to actually lengthen that muscle in the frontal plane. In the transverse plane, we're actually going to want external rotation of the humerus as it comes out. That's also going to further load that muscle. So in those three distinct motion patterns, that coracobrachialis is under maximum tension, relatively speaking. Okay, what about the brachialis, right? Well, this one starts from the outside of the humerus, relatively speaking, front and outside, and ends on the upper part and the internal part of the ulna. So in the sagittal plane, again, any sort of extension of the elbow is going to load it. But because of the diagonal attachment zone in the frontal plane, you're going to get that diagonal loading that's constant because the elbow doesn't really move as a joint left and right. But the attachment and motion of that muscle already loads it in the frontal plane, which is pretty cool. In the transverse plane, if we internally rotate our forearm, it's going to send the ulna backwards, and that's going to lengthen. It's going to make the distance longer from the outside of my humerus to the inside of my arm. Again, we're talking about very relative small details, but it's these small details that add up, right? The devil's always in the details, if you may have heard. So if I want to load my bicep maximally, I got to pay attention to the details. All right, what about the long head of the biceps? Well, that one also starts up at the scapula next to the glenohumeral joint and ends on the inside of the radius. So if I want to load that in three-dimensional tension, well, sagittal plane, that's easy. That's extension of the elbow, but also essentially extension of the shoulder. And then I want the frontal plane, I want to basically take the humerus and make it go through adduction because it takes a long path on the outside. So if I made the path even longer, it's going to load it even more. What about the transverse plane? If I go through internal rotation because it loads and connects to the radius, I want the radius to come way across the body. So the more it can come away from the outside of the shoulder, the more rotational load I'm going to put through it. What about the short head of the biceps? Well, that runs all on the inside. So it also starts at the scapula or the coracoid process, and that is right up here. And as I've also goes to the inside of the radius as well. So three-dimensional tension, sagittal plane, extension, extension. Pretty simple. But what about the frontal plane? I want to take it away from the body line because it attaches way up here. It's a longer path now than it is here. In the transverse plane, I want to externally rotate the forearm because it attaches right here at the scapula. The longer line is if I externally rotate through. So a lot of details, you may be like, whoa, I didn't even consider those particular things. But there's 4 key points about the anatomy of the bicep that I have to share with you based upon what I just shared, is that 2 of the 4 muscles load more, basically get more eccentric loading with internal rotation of the forearm. The other 2 of those 4 muscles get more loading with external rotation of the forearm. So that means I'm going to have to do more internal and external rotation through my bicep exercises to get those particular muscles more engaged than the other side. Well, 3 of the 4 muscles, the coracobrachialis and the long and the short head of the bicep, work together to essentially flex the shoulder. So if I want to basically get bigger biceps, that's why working on shoulder flexion through my concentric phase is so important. And here's the big one. Here's the huge one. 4 of the 4 muscles load the most with elbow extension and shoulder extension at the same time. And this is why these gymnastics guys have such amazing biceps, because they do exercises like the back lever and the iron cross, which both, relatively speaking, have both extension of the elbow and extension of the shoulder at the same time. And that puts tremendous amount of tension or eccentric loading through the tissue, which makes the tissue grow a lot more. So how do you take your compound exercises one step further, right? Let's end this thing out, right? How do you 3-dimensionalize them? And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to 3D a chin-up. So here's what I want you to think about. Both hands, supinated or pronated, right? We want to do both because internal and external rotation of the forearm works. And we want to do just a vertical chin-up. And this is what we already know, right? We call that a sagittal plane chin-up. What about a frontal plane chin-up? Well, both hands, again, supinated and pronated grip at the bar, but we're going to do a right and left body diagonal chin-up. Now, this relatively takes the adduction and abduction of the humerus, so the shoulder, because the body is moving towards and away from the arm, creates that lateral motion fashion. What about the transverse plane? Well, again, bilateral hands supinated or pronated at the bar, and we want a right and left rotational chin-up. This is relative internal and external rotation of the humerus to the shoulder, because the body is moving towards and away from the arm in a left and right rotational fashion. Again, getting that compound lift, but putting in 3-dimensional focuses and intentions to maximize the physics of each and every muscle unit. We can do the same thing with the pull down, right? So check this out. In sagittal plane, we're going to do unilateral hand, and we're going to go hand neutral so we can maximize the rotation, but we're going to do just a vertical pull down, right? That's what we already know, pretty basic. But what about in the frontal plane? Well, again, unilateral hand, neutral grip at handle, right and left lateral pull down. And now this is relative adduction and abduction of the humerus to the shoulder because the arm is moving towards and away from the body in a left and right lateral fashion. What about the transverse plane? Let's go unilateral hand, neutral grip at handle, right and left rotational pull down. Now this is relative internal and external rotation of the forearm to the humerus because the forearm is spinning in a right and left rotational fashion. Again, taking those muscles that we described and putting more three-dimensional load through them, maximizing their intent and their purpose for greater physics and greater response. Now, even though the bicep curl is not a compound exercise, I wanted to end with that one because it's such a traditional lift, but here are some examples of how to three-dimensionalize it as well as a little bit of a bonus. So check this out. Unilateral hand power block, that's a dumbbell, at my hip. I'm doing a power block vertical curl, but I'm driving my elbow in a vertical extension as well. Again, we already know this drill, but we're getting a little bit more compound because we know if we can flex the shoulder, we're going to get a little bit more muscle work. Now, what about the frontal plane? A little something different. Unilateral hand at our hip, power block, right and to left, sagittal plane curl with elbow drive vertical. So basically taking my arm, and as you can see, it's coming in across my body in an adductive way, and then it's coming out across my body in an abducted way. And that puts the lateral tension through those tissues. What about the transverse plane? Unilateral hand power block at hip, power block right to left rotation curl with elbow vertical drive. You can see as my forearm, I start to spin internally to my body, and I start to rotate my humerus and my forearm internally as I begin my curl and my elbow drive, and then I take my arm and I start to spin externally through my forearm and my humerus to get the external rotational tension through these same tissues. Now, I fully understand that these exercises that I just showed you are either something you've never seen before or perhaps something downright weird to the traditional standards, but so was everything that was innovated for its time. We can't let form dictate our function. If we do, then things like the Fallsbury flop in the high jump method would have never broken every record ever set. Apple would have never reinvented the MP3, cell phone, and personal computer to be all in one. Amazon would have never made retail shopping what it is today. And Tesla would have never put a mass market car out there that shames every other car in performance and cost of ownership. What I really want to encourage you to do is get outside of your box and explore your sphere of movement more. The stuff I'm talking about here is not a new discovery. It's physics. We've known about it for years and years and years. We're all taught in school and our certifications about 3 planes of motion. We just haven't been taught on how to actually apply them. And it's really as simple as tweaking your basic exercises like a pull down or a curl or a squat or a deadlift, or even by adding more lateral or transverse motions to train the muscles in a different way. I cannot stress enough the difference three-dimensionalizing your exercises can make in your clients' movement abilities and sports performance. So if you want to dive deeper and learn the same fundamental principles that I use every single day with my clients and I've taught to other trainers as well, click on the link in the description below to check out our multi-dimensional movement coaching mentorship program. We cover the behavioral, the physics, and the biological sciences, the principles and strategies, and teach you how to apply them in your sessions so your clients leave every session feeling like you've met every one of their needs, even the things that they don't know that they needed. So if you want to work with me and my team to level up your movement knowledge and skills, again, check out the MDMC program in the description below. Lastly, if you got some value out of this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and to get notified whenever we release new content. Until the next time, cheers.